I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your son and daughter-in-law. Well, Sheriff, that was just a freak accident. The one I'm worried about is little Timmy. His whole world has been turned upside down, and I'm the only one that he has left now. The sheriff orders his meal, and Albert got up and started to leave. And he said, well, I'll see you, Sheriff. The sheriff asked him, well, what time are they going to bring little Timmy to you today? He said, well, they told me he'd be here around noon. Well, as soon as they come to my office, I'll be sure to be right over and bring him to you. Well, thanks, Sheriff, he said. And he started toward the door. And as he grabbed the door handle, some of the lumberjacks inside there started making fun of him and laughing at him. And, hey, old man, when are we going to see those magic Christmas trees of yours and that lost valley you keep saying they're in? Albert didn't say anything, and he just walked out the door. And the sheriff got up and walked over to the young men that were there, and he says, come on, guys, give him a break. He's got a lot on his plate today. Well, Sheriff, he's just an old fool. He's always talking about magic Christmas trees and a lost valley, and we've been logging up in that forest and those mountains for years, and we've never seen anything up there like that. The sheriff turned to him and says, well, boys, I want to tell you, he says, Albert was doing the same thing, logging up in those mountains for years, long before you were even born. And if he says there's a hidden valley there somewhere and magic trees, then believe me, they're there. So the sheriff left and went back to finish his meal, and Albert went on and went to his shop. And later on that morning, the sheriff came there and opened the door and said, Albert, we have a special gift here for you. Albert turned around and he saw his little grandson standing there, and he knelt down and opened his arms up and says, come here, Timmy, I'm your grandpa. Timmy walked over to him and looked into his eyes. Are you really my grandpa? I sure am, and I'm going to take care of you from now on. And little Timmy went over and wrapped his arms around Grandpa and gave him a big hug. Well, Albert, we'll see you later, the sheriff said. And Timmy started looking around in his grandpa's shop. And, wow, look at all these wooden toys. Can I play with them? Well, you can come in here and play any day that you want, but you can't today. We have to get home. I want to show you where you're going to live and show you your new bedroom and let you meet all my friends. Okay, let's go. So they walked out the door and got into Albert's Jeep, and they started driving toward where Albert lived. And when he turned and started up the driveway, Timmy looked up and he saw the cab, and he says, wow, is this where you live? This looks like Santa Claus. And they pulled up where the cars all have to stop, and they got out, and they walked up on the steps onto the front porch and walked into the house. And when Timmy saw inside the log cabin, he said, wow, this is beautiful in here. He says, well, come over here. This is your special bedroom. So little Timmy walked over there, and he looked in there and says, wow, that's an awful big bed. He says, well, you'll grow into that. Now you set your little suitcase down right there. I want you to come outside. There's some friends I want you to meet. So Timmy walked outside with his grandpa, and they walked down the steps, and Albert turned to him and said, I want you to stand right here now. I'm going to call all my friends. And Albert walked over to where he had a post with a bell on it. And he rang it 1, 2, 3 times. And then he walked back over to Timmy. And all of a sudden, the first one that came out of the forest was Rex. Timmy saw him and goes, whoa, and he got in behind his grandpa and hugged his leg and hid behind him. Because see, Rex was a big bear, big brown bear. When he stood on his hind legs, he was over 7 feet tall. And he walked right over in front of Albert, and he sat down and looked up at Albert and says, come here, Timmy, I want you to meet Rex. Albert looked at Rex and said, Rex, this is Timmy, my grandson. I want you to take care of him and protect him. Oh, Rex took his nose and kind of nudged Timmy a little bit. Then he sniffed him, and wow, his whiskers tickle. Well, he's going to be your friend. Go ahead and pet him. So he started touching his fur, and pretty soon he got a little closer and a little closer, and then he tried giving him a hug, and he just nestled right into that soft fur. He started petting Rex, and Rex just laid down and rolled over on his back, and Albert said, well, scratch his belly. He likes to be scratched. And he's just scratching this big bear's belly. He was just, you could hear the bear just moaning and moaning. He loved every minute of it. Pretty soon, Timmy looked up, and here came all of the other animals out of the forest. Timmy couldn't believe it. Albert told him, he says, Timmy, now these are all my friends. He says, you're going to have to learn all their names so you'll be able to talk to them every day. Oh, I will, he said. So then Grandpa said, well, you can stay out here and play with them for a while. I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix supper. So Grandpa went inside and he fixed supper and was done. He stuck his head outside. Well, come on, Timmy, you got to come in for dinner. Timmy got up on the porch and he turned around back to his animals and he waved at him and says, good night, see you tomorrow. They went inside and they sat down and ready to have their meal, and Grandpa prayed to God and thanked for little Timmy coming there, and he just prayed that God would give him the wisdom and knowledge to raise this little boy. So it came bedtime, and Albert took him into the bedroom, and he got dressed for bed, and he got in bed, and Albert tucked him in and said a prayer for him, and then he asked if he'd like to be read a book. And Timmy said, oh yeah, I'd like that. So Albert went over and grabbed a book. It was one that he used to read to Timmy's dad every night when he was young. It was about a train that could. And he sat there and he read that book, and about halfway through, Timmy fell asleep, and Albert covered him up, and then he shut off the lights and he turned a night light on just in case Timmy would get up during the night. The next morning they got up and Albert fixed breakfast, and he woke Timmy up and told him that he had to get ready because he had to go to school. Right away Timmy said, well, I don't want to go to school. And he says, no, you have to go to school. So they got ready, and Albert drove into town and walked Timmy up to the schoolhouse and down the hallway and stood right outside of Timmy's room. And Timmy really didn't want to go in, and Albert said, well, Timmy, you're going to have lots of friends in there, and you're going to be learning a lot of things that you need to know. And when you get out of school, I'll be standing here right in this very spot. Timmy looked up at him and said, well, Mom and Dad said that, and they never came back. And Albert stopped and bent down and hugged him and said, well, Timmy, they got in their accident. They would have come back if they could. But I'm going to be here every day for you. As long as you're in school, I'll be here in this very spot. Okay, Timmy said. And just then the school teacher opened the door. And, well, you must be Timmy. Well, come on in. I want to introduce you to your class. So Timmy went inside with her, and she shut the door, and Albert could hear her say, class, I'd like to have you meet Timmy. Everyone make him welcome. So Albert left and went on down to his shop, and he had some orders to fill and some projects to work on. And time got away from him. Next time he looked at the clock, it was time to leave and go to school. So he got to school and stood right in the same spot that he told Timmy that he would be there. When Timmy came out, he looked over, and there was his grandpa. And he went over and he took his grandpa by the hand, and they went out and got back in the Jeep and started driving home. And, well, did you make any friends today? No, Grandpa, they're not very friendly. Well, I'm sure you'll find just a special person. And they went on home, and Grandpa went in to make supper, and Timmy stayed outside. He rang the bell and called all of his friends, and he was telling all of his friends of what happened at school that day. When supper was done, Grandpa stuck his head out. Come on, Timmy, it's time for supper. Timmy got back up on the porch, and, well, goodbye, see you guys tomorrow, and he said, and went inside and he had a meal. And Grandpa prayed, and he asked for God to send a special friend to be with Timmy, one that would be his friend for life. So the next morning they got up for school, and Timmy really didn't want to go because the kids weren't too friendly to him that first day. And this went on for the whole first week, and Timmy still hadn't found a friend. And every night Albert would pray that God would send a special friend to Timmy. So school started the next week, and Albert took him to school that Monday, and Timmy went inside just as normal. And when Timmy got out of school that night, he was all excited. He found a friend. So on the way home, him and his grandpa were talking about Timmy's new friend, and of course, Timmy was doing most of the talking. He was so excited about his new friend. And Grandpa says, well, tell me all about your friend. And he says, well, Grandpa, her name's Ellie. She helped me in all the projects we had today, and she's really smart. And we had a good time. Do you think I could ask her to come over on Saturday, and we could spend the day and talk to all of our friends? Well, I think that'd be okay as long as your mom said it is. Well, I'll ask her tomorrow. So the next day, Timmy got to school, and he didn't even tell his grandpa goodbye. He just went right on in his classroom because he wanted to talk to Ellie. So Albert left and went back to his shop, and time for school to get out, and Albert was there waiting for Timmy again. And Timmy came out, and this time he was all excited because he said he talked to Ellie and that he asked her to come for Saturday, and they were just waiting to hear what her mother had to say. And so they got home again that night, and Timmy was outside telling all of his friends about his new friend Ellie and that she might be over on Saturday if her mom will let her come. Albert called him in for dinner, and he prayed to God again and thanked God for sending a friend for Timmy to be with. The next morning, Grandpa didn't even have to wake Timmy up. He was up early, and he was so excited he wanted to find out if Ellie was going to be able to come on Saturday. When they got to school again, he just left Grandpa standing there, and he ran into his room. And that evening when Grandpa picked him up, Timmy was so excited, he said, Ellie's going to be able to come on Saturday. And all the way home, that's all he talked about was Ellie, 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 and the fun they were going to have on Saturday. So finally Saturday came, and Timmy was up real early, and his grandpa was making breakfast, and he asked him, well, what are you up so early for? Well, Ellie's going to be here today. He says, well, I don't think she's going to be here this early. Well, I just want to make sure I'm here in time. So they went out and they sat on the porch, and on the porch, Grandpa had his rocking chair sitting there, and he had a small one made for Timmy, and they sat there and talked a lot on the porch and just talked to all the animals. And later on, a car pulled up the driveway, and Grandpa, Ellie's here. And he went down to where all the cars have to stop at and met Ellie when she got out of the car, and met Ellie's mother and came up to where Albert was and introduced herself. And Albert asked if it would be okay if Ellie could stay there through dinner. And he'd bring her home after dinner that night. And she said it was okay, so she left. And Grandpa went back on in the house, and Timmy stayed out there with Ellie and said, now, I want you to meet my friends. I want you to stand right here. And Timmy goes over to the pole where the bell was at, and he rang the bell 1, 2, 3 times. And then he came back over and stood by Ellie. And just like always, the first one out of the forest was Rex. Ellie saw him, and she took off running on the front porch and was about ready to run in the door. And he says, no, Ellie, come on back. It's just Rex. He's friendly. So she came back, and she stood by Timmy, and Rex came over, and he looked at Rex in the eyes and says, Rex, now this is Ellie. She's my friend. I want you to be nice to her. So Rex looked over at her, and he nudged her with his nose a little bit, and then he sniffed, and she said, his whiskers tickle. He says, yeah, I said that too. And he says, then here, watch, here's what he likes. And he starts scratching Rex, and next thing you know, Rex laid down, rolled over, and they both were just scratching his belly. And Rex was just loving every minute of it. Then pretty soon all the other animals started coming out of the forest, and Ellie couldn't believe that he had this many friends. And Timmy said, well, and they each have a name, and I'm learning the names, and you'll have to learn them too. So then Grandpa called them in for lunch, and they had lunch, and then supper came, and then it was time for Ellie to go home. And Timmy asked his grandpa if it'd be okay if Ellie came over again on another Saturday, and he said, well, that'll be fine, as long as her mom says it's okay. And after that, Ellie was over just about every Saturday playing and talking to all the animals along with Timmy. And then on Saturday mornings, Timmy and his grandfather would go into town and have breakfast. That was a special thing they did starting about 2 weeks after Timmy got there. And they had their breakfast, and then they'd walk down to Albert's shop. But the one morning, they were just ready to leave the restaurant, and those same lumberjacks were in there. And as Albert got to the door, they started making fun of him again. Hey, old man, when are we going to see those magic trees in that special valley you say you have? And they started laughing and just making more and more fun of him. And Albert just walked on out the door and shut the door behind him. And Timmy asked him, well, Grandpa, how come you don't say anything to those guys when they make fun of you and talk to you like that? And he said, well, Timmy, he said, God tells us in the Bible that if people say things or do things to us, to just turn the other cheek. He says, the things they say to me are just words. They don't hurt me. And I figure as long as they're talking about me and doing things about me, that they're not looking for the trees or that special place in the forest. And that's what I want. I don't want them to ever find that place. And someday when you grow up, I'll show you where it's at. But you have to promise me that no one will ever know where it's at. Oh, I will, Grandpa. I'll protect it. So they went on back to Grandpa's shop, and Timmy played with all the toys all day, and Albert finished filling all the orders and working on projects that he had to get out. And they did this day after day and week after week. And as time went on, Timmy and Ellie grew closer and closer together and became more and more friends. They were together all the time. And as they started getting into the high school, Grandpa didn't have to take Timmy to school anymore. Timmy took Grandpa to work, and then he kept the car so that him and Ellie could do things after school, and then he'd come by and pick Grandpa up and take him home in the evening. But one night, sitting at the supper table, Timmy turned to Grandpa, and he said, "Grandpa, I think I'm getting sick. I don't feel very good." Grandpa said, "Well, your head doesn't feel warm. What's your symptoms?" And he says, "Well, I don't know. It seems like every time I get near Ellie, my stomach just does flip-flops, and I just feel sick at my stomach." And Grandpa says, "Well, Timmy, I don't think there's anything a doctor is going to be able to give you for that." He says, "Well, why not?" He says, "Well, we call that lovesick." "Lovesick? What's that?" He says, "Well, Timmy, that's a time when your friendship changes and it turns into love for a person." "Well, I don't know so much about that. Does Ellie feel the same way about you?" "Well, I don't know. We never talked about that." "Well, I think you need to find out if she feels that same way." "All right, I'll ask her." So a few days later, they're sitting at the supper table again, and, "Well, Grandpa, I got your answer for your question." "What question was that?" "Well, the question about if Ellie feels the same way about me." "Well, does she?" "What'd she say?" "Well, it's not so much what she said, it's what she did." He said, "Well, what'd she do?" He said, "Well, I told her how I felt about her, and then I gave her a kiss, and then she gave me a kiss back." He says, "So I guess we're not friends anymore. We're kind of boyfriend and girlfriend." Well, Timmy, that's usually how it is. And so from then on, every time you saw Timmy, you saw Allie. And they were never apart. And she was over at the house just about every day, and Grandpa had another rocking chair put out on the front porch for her. And they would sit there and just talk and watch all of the scenery of nature, and Grandpa just sat there and whittled a block of wood. And then all of a sudden, one night at the supper table, Timmy turned to his grandpa and said, "Grandpa, I need to talk to you about something." And he said, "What's up, son?" And he says, "Well, Ellie and I are going to graduate from high school pretty soon, and we're going to be leaving for college. And we're kind of worried about how we're going to fit in, if we're still going to be able to see each other, or if we're still going to like each other. And we've never been apart before, and she's going to be going to a different college than I'm going to. And we just kind of worry about all that." And Grandpa said, "Well, son," he says, "just pray to God about it, because if it's meant to be, you guys are going to see each other. You know you're going to see each other on spring break and Christmas break and all during the summer." Well, I guess so. And time came, and they graduated from high school, and they both went off to college. And Grandpa was right. Every time they came home, they were together as if nothing was wrong. And their love for each other just kept growing more and more. Timmy graduated from college first, and he came home, and he got a job with the forestry department and became the head forest ranger. His responsibility was to take care of all the animals and make sure there were no poachers, and to take care of all the trees and make sure that all the logging companies abided by all the rules. And then 2 years later, Ellie graduated, and she was a doctor. And she came back home, and they were sitting there at dinner one night, and she said, "Well, Timmy, it looks like you and I are going to be working together." "Oh, so you're that new person they said they hired?" "Yeah, my responsibility is to take care of all the plants and the trees and take care of all the animals in the forest." So they were a perfect team. They worked together every day in the forest. And a few years later, at dinner time, they asked Grandpa again, Grandpa, there's something that we need to talk to you about. Sure, what's up, kids? Well, Grandpa, Ellie and I decided we want to get married. And we'd like to know if we could do it right here in the front yard and have all of our friends here watching. Well, I think that'd be a great idea. And there's something else we'd like to ask you, too. If it'd be okay if we move in with you here at the cabin and take care of you and all the things that need to be taken care of here, and plus it'll be closer to the forest for us. Well, I think that'd be a great idea, Grandpa said. And so in a few months, Ellie and Timmy got married, and they started moving into the cabin there with Grandpa. And Grandpa sold his business, and he didn't have to do anything anymore except sit out on the porch in his rocking chair and whittle on that piece of wood and talk to all of his animals. And then one night at supper, Timmy asked his grandpa another question. He says, Grandpa, have you heard about the problem with the Christmas tree in town this year? Well, I heard something about that, but what's going on? I really don't know all about it. He says, well, you know how important the Christmas tree is for the town. Every year we have the big tree lighting ceremony, and then we have the Christmas pageant, and we have all the Christmas carols, and how happy and joyous everybody in town is to start the Christmas season. Well, this year the lumberjacks got such a rush, and they got out of the forest so soon, and then the snow fell, they weren't able to bring out the Christmas tree for the town. So it looks like the town's not going to have a Christmas tree this year, so everyone's kind of getting down in the dumps a little bit. And it's kind of sad. And Ellie and I were wondering if it'd be okay if we went into your special valley and give the town one of your special Christmas trees. Grandpa thought for a few moments, and well, kids, I think that might be a good idea. We might need to be thinning out that valley a little bit. It might be getting overgrown. That'll be fine as long as you don't let anybody know where the tree came from. Oh, Grandpa, we'll never tell them that. So after supper, Tim and Allie went to the hidden valley. Ellie had always heard about it, and she never knew where it was. And when they went there, and she made her first step into that valley, wow, these trees are gorgeous. Now I can see why your grandfather wanted to protect these all these years. So they found the tree that they wanted, and they cut it down, and they brought it to town, or to the cabin, and they wanted to wait to take it to town after everyone fell asleep. So about midnight, they left for town, and they took the tree down to the square and dropped it off where the Christmas tree is always put, and then they left. And the next morning, when the townspeople started waking up, the word spread like wildfire. Everyone had to rush to the city square to check on this Christmas tree. It was just magically there. No one admitted bringing it there, and they never knew where it came from. It was just there. Everyone that had been in the town for a long time kind of thought it might be one of Albert's special trees, but no one wanted to say anything. They wanted to keep the magic alive, the magic of Christmas, and how much happiness that the tree brought to the town. The trees from then on were never cut down by the lumberjacks anymore. It was just they left it up to Majic to bring that tree there to the town every year. And every year there was a tree that was more prettier than the year before. And it just made the town more happy and more blessings to them. The trees just kept coming many, many years, long after Albert had passed away. But you see, there's another Albert now. He's just now learning how to walk, and he sits out in the grass every summer and plays with all the animals. And he's yet to learn the story about his great-grandfather and the magic Christmas trees in the hidden valley that he loved and protected all these years. You have a Merry Christmas.